The fate of Lettie Campbell. The years passed like a slow, relentless tide, eroding the Campbell family bit by bit. The latch on Lettie's door never came off. At first, there had been moments of hope, times when Abigail thought maybe she could bring Lettie back. When she would sit by the door and talk, her voice soft and coaxing, telling stories of the farm, of Sammy and Mary and James, of the way the wheat swayed golden in the fields. Sometimes Lettie would respond, a whisper, a laugh, but never a normal one, never the way she used to. And then there were the other nights, the nights when Thomas had to hold Abigail back as she pounded on the door, screaming Lettie's name, begging her to stop with the awful noises, the scratching, the muttering, the low, strange singing that seemed to have no tune at all. James left home first. He had seen too much. He had seen his father harden into something unrecognizable. He had seen his mother wilt under the weight of grief. And he had seen his sister become a shadow locked away in that room. When he was old enough, he took a horse and rode west and never looked back. Sammy never spoke of Lettie, even as he grew, even as his arm healed and the years dulled the memory of the night she had nearly crushed it. He refused to acknowledge what lay upstairs. And Mary, sweet, innocent Mary, stayed the longest. She was the only one who dared to sneak into the room. She was small enough to fit through the gap when the latch was undone for food. And for a while, she was the only one Lettie would talk to. She would slip in, curling beside Lettie on the small, rotting mattress, whispering about the outside world, about the horses, about the way the sky turned purple at dusk. And Lettie, her once vibrant sister, would listen. She would stroke Mary's hair, humming under her breath. Until one day, Mary stopped going. She never told anyone why. She only said in a quiet, trembling voice, "She isn't Lettie anymore." That was the last time the latch was ever lifted. By the time the first gray streaks touched Thomas Campbell's hair, Lettie was still up there, still breathing, still whispering, still existing in that room that smelled of dust and something else, something rotting. But she was not alive, not truly, anyways. Her skin had gone sallow, her bones sharper beneath it. She barely ate anymore. She barely moved from her corner. She did not scream. She did not cry. She only stared at the wall, her lips moving soundlessly, her fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air. When Thomas died, Abigail did not weep. She stood at his grave, hands folded neatly, staring at the dark earth that swallowed him whole. And later that night, for the first time in years, she climbed the stairs alone. Her heart pounded as she stood outside the door. The wood was warped now, the edges darkened from years of candle smoke. She reached out, hesitated, then lifted the latch. The door groaned open. The stench hit her first. Unwashed skin, damp wood, something sharp underneath it all. And there, in the farthest corner, barely more than a heap of tangled hair and thin limbs, was Lettie. She did not look up. She did not acknowledge her. Abigail stepped inside, her breath shallow. Lettie? Nothing. She was a husk now, a ghost of the girl she had once been. The thing that had taken root inside her, whatever sickness, whatever curse, had completely devoured her at this point. Abigail knelt beside her, reaching out a trembling hand to touch her daughter's cheek. It was cold. Her skin was cold. And finally, after years of endurance, of guilt, of sorrow so heavy it had nearly broken her, Abigail wept. She gathered Lettie into her arms, rocking her, whispering apologies over and over. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But it was too late. It had been too late for a long, long time. No one knows exactly when Lettie Campbell died. Maybe it was that night in her mother's arms. Maybe it had been years before when the latch first went on. Or maybe she had never died at all. Maybe she simply faded, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. The house stood for many years after, but the room upstairs was never touched again. Even after Abigail was gone, after Sammy and Mary had moved away, and after the land was sold off to strangers, no one ever opened that door. And those who passed by the old farmhouse in the dead of night swore they could still hear something from inside. A soft whimper, maybe a distant laugh, or the faint sound of a girl humming to herself, lost in the dark.